The bitter wind howled across the endless, white plains of Russia, a constant, sharp whisper that felt more like a physical blow than a sound. It was the winter of 1812, and I was just another ghost in Napoleon's Grande Armée, a private named Jean-Luc, lost in a sea of grey and frost. My uniform was a thin shield against the cruel cold, and my boots, once sturdy, were now just frozen leather barely holding my feet together. Every step was a fight, a crunch of snow and a protest from my bones. Our regiment, or what was left of it, had not seen a warm fire or a full stomach in weeks. The men around me were hollow-eyed and silent, their faces caked in ice, their breath a constant cloud. We marched, not because we had hope, but because stopping meant freezing to death. We were leaving Moscow, but the way back home was a path of suffering. The stories of glory from the emperor's past seemed like a dream someone else had. All that was real was the cold, the hunger, and the fear. It was on the third day of this slow retreat that everything changed. We were passing through a silent, dead forest, the trees looking like black, skeletal fingers reaching for the pale sky. The order came to stop for a short rest. I collapsed against a tree trunk, too tired to even feel the cold anymore. My friend Antoine, a man with a tired but kind face, was searching the ground nearby, kicking at the snow with his boot. He was always looking for something, anything, a discarded knife, a piece of old cloth, a forgotten meal. Suddenly he stopped. He was staring at the ground, his body stiff. I saw him reach down and pull something out of the deep snow. It wasn't a log or a rock. It was small, round, and it seemed to glow with a strange, faint blue light. He held it in his palm, and the light pulsed softly, like a slow heartbeat. "What is it, Antoine?" I asked, my voice a dry rasp. He just shook his head, looking at the object with a mix of fear and wonder. The object was a compass, but like none I had ever seen. Its case was not brass or wood, but a strange, dark metal that felt oddly warm to the touch. The glass on top was perfect, clear as water. Inside, the needle was not an ordinary pointer. It was a thin, twisting line of light, and it wasn't pointing north. It was turning slowly, then stopping, then turning again, pointing to nothing we could understand. The glowing light inside made the snow around it look like it was alive. Our sergeant, a tough man named Dubois who had lost an eye at Borodino, came over. "What have you found, boy?" he grumbled, his voice rough. Antoine held out the compass. Dubois took it, his one good eye narrowing. He turned it over in his hand, his expression changing from irritation to confusion, and then to a hint of worry. The needle light twitched, and then pointed directly towards the old sergeant's chest. Dubois quickly gave it back, as if the object had burned him. "Strange. It's no use to us. Throw it away." Antoine didn't. He looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. I shrugged. What could it hurt? We had nothing to lose. As our column began to move again, Antoine slipped the strange compass into his coat. For the rest of the day, it was a secret between us. But the next morning, Antoine was gone. He had not run away. His footprints were there, leading from our camp and into the woods, just a single set of boot marks. There were no signs of a struggle. It was as if he had simply walked away in the night. The sergeant did not care, one less mouth to feed. But I was worried. He was my friend. I felt a cold knot of dread in my stomach, and as I walked, I saw something shiny on the ground in the snow. It was the compass. Antoine must have dropped it. I bent down and picked it up. It was still glowing with that faint blue light. The needle light inside was now spinning fast, then it stopped and pointed directly towards the west. West was the way home, but it was not the path our army was taking. Our commander had ordered us to stay on the main road, to follow the other regiments. But the compass, it seemed to call to me, a silent promise of a different way. A way that might be shorter, safer, a way out of this frozen hell. My stomach twisted with the memory of Antoine and the fear that maybe this object had something to do with his disappearance. But the promise of a quicker way home was too strong to ignore. That night, under the pale glow of a winter moon, I snuck away from the sleeping camp. I had the compass in my hand, its faint light my only guide. The needle was now pointing steadily west, towards a dark, unseen corner of the forest. The cold was a monster, but the hope the compass offered was a tiny, warm flame. I walked for hours, following the strange light through the endless trees. My feet hurt, my body was numb, and the silent forest felt heavy with unseen things. I heard sounds that were not real, saw shadows move that were not there. The compass never wavered. It led me deeper and deeper into the unknown, far from the army and the familiar path of retreat. Just when I thought I could go no further, just as the first gray light of dawn began to touch the sky, the compass's light pulsed brightly, and the needle spun wildly, then stopped, pointing down, to the ground in front of me. I looked up and saw that the trees had changed. The black, dead forest was gone, replaced by a strange, ancient wood of trees with white bark and leaves like silver. The air here was still and silent, and it did not feel cold. The compass had led me to a place that should not exist in the heart of Russia, a place hidden from the war. And there, buried in the snow, was a great, round door made of the same dark, warm metal as the compass itself, with strange glowing symbols on its surface. The door was half open, and from the dark space inside, a sound came, a low, musical hum that vibrated in my bones and filled my head. The humming was beautiful, but it was also wrong, and from the darkness of the door, a faint, sweet smell of flowers drifted out, a smell that no one had a right to experience in the middle of a frozen, silent wilderness. The warm metal of the half-open door felt like a living thing under my fingers, humming with that same low, beautiful sound that now pulled at my thoughts. The glowing symbols on its surface seemed to shift and rearrange themselves, a silent language I could not understand but felt like a whisper of secrets. Every single part of my body, every instinct I had as a soldier and as a man, screamed at me to turn around, to run back into the brutal, familiar cold of the Russian winter, to join the slow, painful march towards France. But something was holding me in place. The sweet smell of flowers was too much of a promise. It spoke of life, of summer, of a world that was not dying. And the question of Antoine was a hot, burning coal in my mind. He had held this compass, he had followed it, and now he was gone. Had he found this door? Was he inside? Was he okay? The humming from the darkness was now a call, a silent invitation that felt like it was only for me. I took a deep breath of the impossibly warm air, the clean scent of soil and petals filling my lungs, a feeling so foreign after weeks of nothing but the smell of snow and death that it made me dizzy. My fear was still there, but it was now wrapped up in a blanket of overwhelming curiosity and a strange sense of fate. I had followed a strange light through a strange forest. What else did I have to lose? My regiment was gone. My future was nothing but a cold tomb in the snow. I reached for my rifle, but then I stopped. It felt like a useless stick here. I took a single, slow step through the half-open door and into the dark space. The moment I crossed the line, the world changed. The snow and the black forest behind me seemed to disappear, replaced by an impossible light. I was not in a dark room or a cave. I was standing in a massive, open space, a grand hall with no clear walls or ceiling. The floor beneath my feet was like polished black stone, but it felt soft and warm, and when I looked closely, it seemed to be filled with tiny, moving stars, like a piece of the night sky had fallen to the ground. Above me, this sky, was a slow, shifting ocean of colors, pinks and purples and deep blues that swirled together like paint in water, with no sun and no moon, just this soft, gentle light that came from everywhere and nowhere all at once. The humming sound was louder now, filling my ears and my head, making my teeth buzz. It felt like a song without words, a melody of pure peace that was so beautiful it hurt. I walked forward, each step silent on the star floor. The air was not just warm, it was perfect. I was no longer hungry or tired or cold. The wounds on my feet from the long march had healed, and the ache in my bones was gone. It was like I had never been a soldier, never marched through the ice. The heavy, heavy weight of the war, the images of dead friends and the constant, bitter fear, all of it seemed to lift away from me, like dust on the wind. I felt light and clean, and I had to fight back the tears that wanted to come, tears of relief that felt so new and so strange. As I went deeper into the light-filled hall, I began to see things floating in the air, things that were not real objects. The low, menacing buzz was no longer a background sound but a constant, terrible note in the air, a deep, grinding hum that felt like it was coming from the very stone under my feet, a sound that made my teeth ache and the small hairs on my arms stand straight up. This terrible noise was a living thing, a hungry growl, and it was now joined by a sharp, high-pitched whine that cut through the air and filled my head, making it difficult to think. The beautiful, sweet smell of flowers, which had once promised so much, was now thick with the scent of decay, a suffocating perfume of rot and old, damp earth that made my stomach turn and my mouth taste of dust. I looked at Antoine again, a cold dread filling my heart. His face, so calm and peaceful, was a lie, a terrible mask. This place had not saved him, it had taken him, stolen his soul and left an empty shell behind. He was a perfect, silent monument to a terrible thing, and all the other statues in their different uniforms were the same, a silent army of the lost. The French soldier from the Revolution, a man in a tattered blue coat, stood with a musket in his hand, his eyes staring straight ahead, empty of all feeling. Beside him was a Roman legionnaire, his bronze armor clean and bright, his face a mask of stone, and near him, a knight in rusty armor, a man from a time before guns, his hands still holding the hilt of a broken sword as if in the last moment of a great battle. I saw men in uniforms I didn't recognize from wars I didn't know, a man in a strange metal hat and goggles, a man in a simple brown coat with a strange, heavy machine on his back, a man in a long coat with a feathered hat that seemed to belong to a king. They were from every war, every time, every corner of the world, and they all shared the same empty eyes, the same silent calm, the same terrible fate. This was a grave, not a haven. My hand, holding the compass, began to feel a strange, cold pressure. The green light was growing brighter, a fierce, angry glow that made the swirling colors of the sky above me seem dim and weak. The needle light inside was no longer spinning or pointing. It was twitching, a fast, nervous shake, and then it began to pull. Not just pointing, but physically pulling my arm with a shocking, impossible strength, dragging me forward. I tried to resist, planting my feet on the warm, starry stone, but it was like pulling against an invisible rope tied to an unstoppable force. My feet scraped on the ground, and I was forced to follow where the compass wanted to go. The humming sound changed again, now becoming a sharp, high-pitched whine that cut through the low buzz, and the floating memories in the air became more frantic. They were no longer calm dreams of a field of flowers. Now I saw brief, violent flashes of their last moments, moments of terror and pain, of ending. I saw a man falling from a high wall, a flash of red fire, a face twisted in pain, a ship sinking into a dark sea, a man screaming without sound as a great iron cannon fired. These were not just memories. They were the last thoughts, the final breaths, the last terror before they became one of the statues. And the compass was leading me through them, making me a part of them, forcing me to see the moments that had led all these men to this terrible place. As I was dragged forward, I saw that the compass was not leading me randomly. It was pulling me towards the center of the vast hall, to a place where the swirling lights above were brightest, and where the black stone floor seemed to ripple with more of the tiny stars. The statues stood closer together here, a silent army of the lost, their faces showing the last moments of their lives before this place took them. I saw a man from a time before guns, his face pale and his hands still holding the hilt of a broken sword. I saw a man in a strange metal hat and goggles, his face covered in soot, looking up at the sky in his last moment. And then I saw something that made my breath catch in my throat and my heart hammer in my chest, the floating, ghostly memory of Antoine, a faint, glowing copy of him, stood with the other violent flashes. I watched his final moment, the moment the compass found him in the forest. He looked down at the compass, and the blue light grew bright. He smiled, a smile of relief and hope, and then his eyes went blank. That was it. The compass did not kill him. It did not harm him. It simply emptied him, leaving his body behind as a perfect, empty shell, a beautiful ghost. The humming was now a siren's song, and I realized with a sudden, terrible shock that the sound was not coming from the ground or the air. It was coming from the statues themselves, a chorus of silent, empty men singing with the last bits of their life, and the smell of rot was not from the flowers, but from the slow, quiet decay of their souls. This was the true terror of this place, Not a monster, not a physical enemy, but a gentle, beautiful stealing of everything that made a man himself, a slow, perfect death that left no body to bury and no grave to mourn over. The compass suddenly stopped pulling, its green light throbbing with a terrible energy. I fell to my knees, panting, and looked up. I was in the very center of the hall, and in front of me was a tall, glowing pillar of the same dark metal as the compass and the door. It was the source of the low buzz, of the terrible siren song. The pillar had no clear shape. It seemed to shimmer and change, and on its surface, the same strange symbols from the door were moving, a constant stream of them, like words in a language of pure energy. The pillar hummed with a sound that was pure power, and from its top, the swirling sky was brightest, and the starry floor below it was a dazzling, moving river of light. And then, from the surface of the pillar, a single, new symbol appeared, a symbol that had not been there before, and I saw it was the shape of a man. The image was simple, a rough outline, and inside it, a tiny, faint blue light was blinking, like a distant star. The green light of my compass pulsed fiercely, and I felt a strange and terrible truth bloom in my mind. The compass was not a guide. It was a key, a tool used to find and bring souls here. It did not lead to safety, but to this place. And the men, the soldiers from all the different wars, were not just trapped here. They were part of the pillar. Their souls, or what was left of them, were the fuel for this terrible machine, and the pillar used them to do something. I didn't know what, but I knew I did not want to find out. The compass in my hand now felt like a living creature, hot and cold at the same time, its green light throbbing with a terrible energy. I looked down at the floor, at the river of stars, and I felt a pull, a gentle, soothing promise that if I just let go, if I just gave up, I could be one of the beautiful, silent statues, forever free from the war and the cold and the hunger. It was a tempting promise, a siren song that reached deep inside my tired bones and asked me to give up the pain and just be at peace. It told me that to die in the snow was to be forgotten, but to become a statue here was to become a part of something eternal, to be a light in the pillar forever. But the memory of Antoine's empty face, of his soul being stolen for some unknown purpose, was a cold slap to my spirit. I had to fight. I had to find a way out, but the compass was humming now, a low, sweet sound that was no longer a promise of peace, but a demand. It wanted to be put on the pillar. It wanted me to become part of the silent chorus. I tightened my grip, my knuckles white, and I knew that my next step would decide everything, whether I would be a man of war who died fighting, or a beautiful, silent statue in a terrible, empty tomb. The choice was a weight in my mind, heavier than any musket I had ever carried. The compass, with its terrible green glow, was now demanding to be placed on the pillar. Its pull was stronger than ever, a physical and spiritual force that wanted to merge my very being with the quiet, empty souls that surrounded me. I could feel the hum of the statues, a low, sweet siren song that promised an end to all pain, a final release from the suffering of the world. It was a tempting thing, a whispered promise of peace in a place that had only known war. I looked at Antoine again, at his calm, blank face, and the ghost of his final, hopeful smile. That smile was a warning, a terrible truth. This was not peace. This was simply an end. I tightened my grip on the compass, my knuckles turning white, and a single, clear thought cut through the humming and the siren song. I would not give in. I would not become a ghost in a machine. I would not give my soul to this beautiful, empty place. I did not know how to fight this, how to break free, but I knew I had to try. I looked around the hall, my eyes moving over the silent army of statues. They were all standing still, looking at nothing, but they were not just objects. They were echoes of lives, of stories, of men who had fought and died. My eyes fell on the Roman legionnaire, his hand still holding a spear. His gaze was fixed on a point far above him, as if in his last moments he had been looking at a god or a star. I saw the knight in his rusty armor, his face a silent cry of pain, and I knew that this place had taken him in the middle of a terrible battle. And then I saw something that made me stop breathing. It was a faint, almost invisible light, like a tiny spark, floating just at the edge of the knight's chest, right where his heart would have been. It was not part of the humming, glowing pillar. It was a different light, a flickering, stubborn light that seemed to be trying to push against the terrible silence. I looked closer, and I saw the same faint spark on the Roman soldier, on the man in the strange hat and goggles, on all of them, a tiny, almost dead star glowing deep within their chests. These were not just empty shells. There was something left of them. There was a tiny piece of their soul, a final, last spark of life that this place had not been able to steal. It was the last memory of their fight, the last bit of who they were, and it was a promise. The humming sound changed. The green light of the compass pulsed with a terrible, angry beat. The pillar sensed my defiance. It knew I was not giving in. The air around me grew heavy, and the ground under my feet began to tremble, and from the pillar itself, a bright, painful light shot out and hit the statues. The sparks in their chests flickered and grew brighter, as if a great wind was trying to blow out a tiny flame. The statues themselves remained still, but their faces seemed to contort for a brief moment in an unheard scream of pain. The pillar was trying to finish them, to kill that last, stubborn bit of their souls. I knew I had to act, but what could I do? The compass in my hand was a prison. I couldn't throw it away, its pull was too strong. I couldn't give in to it, or I would become a statue myself. My mind raced, trying to find a solution. I looked at the compass, its green light like a hungry eye, and I thought of Antoine, of his empty face. This compass, this terrible key, was the reason for all of this. It had brought me here. It had taken him. And I realized that it was not just a tool for the pillar. It was the pillar's heart, its connection to the outside world. It was the part of this place that was physical, that was real, and it was the source of its power. I had to break it. I held the compass in both hands, fighting against its pull. I didn't have a weapon. I didn't have a hammer or a stone. I was just a man with a piece of glowing metal in a tomb of silent soldiers. I tried to pull the two halves apart, to twist the strange dark metal, but it was like trying to break a mountain. It would not budge. My hands began to burn from the terrible energy of the green light. I felt my own soul begin to flicker, a small, painful pinch in my chest, and I knew that if I did not do something now, I would be next. And then I thought of the Roman soldier. His spear. And the knight. His broken sword. All of them had come here with their weapons. Their last moments were of their fight. Their very identity was tied to the war, to their profession. And the pillar had taken that too. It had taken their identity and left them with nothing. The compass wasn't a physical tool. It was a tool of souls. I looked at the pillar, at the endless stream of symbols moving on its surface, and I saw that the compass's green light was now mirroring a symbol on the pillar, the one of the man with the blinking blue light. I looked down at the compass again, at its glowing needle, and I realized what I had to do. It was not about breaking the compass with my hands. It was about using what I had. The compass had stolen their souls, and their souls were still here, fighting. I took a deep breath, and I looked at my own hands, at the calluses and the dirt from the long march, and I thought of my own soul, of who I was. I was not a statue. I was a soldier. I was Jean-Luc, a man who had survived Borodino and the endless, frozen road. I was a man who still had a will to live. I was a man of war, and I would fight this beautiful, silent death. I placed the compass on the ground and then, with all my strength, I brought my foot down on it. It was a terrible, desperate act. I didn't know what would happen. The moment my boot hit the compass, there was a blinding flash of green light, so bright that I had to close my eyes. The sound in the hall became a deafening, terrible scream, a sound of pure pain and rage, and the ground shook with a force that threw me to the floor. The scream was from the pillar. I opened my eyes, and I saw that the compass was not broken. It had shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces, and each piece was now a small, faint blue light, fluttering up into the air. And then I saw the statues. The faint sparks in their chests, the last bits of their souls, were no longer flickering. They were burning with a new, bright light, a light of pure, unyielding fire. And from their mouths, a silent chorus of their last moments rang out, not of pain, but of a shout, a battle cry. I had not just broken a tool. I had freed the last sparks of their souls. The humming stopped. The siren song was replaced by the silent roar of 1,000 dead men. And the pillar, the terrible, glowing pillar began to shake. A single, dark crack appeared on its surface, and from the crack, a black, oily smoke began to pour out, a smoke that smelled of dead flowers and rot. It was dying. And as it died, the swirling lights in the sky began to change. They were no longer beautiful and peaceful. They were turning a deep, angry red, the color of blood, and the starry floor below me began to feel cold and hard. This place was changing, becoming something else, something terrible, and I knew that my fight was not over. Breaking the compass had not saved me. It had only begun the war. The angry red light from the sky above me was now a terrible sun, and the low, constant roar from the thousand tiny sparks, the freed souls, was a new kind of battle cry. The air, which had once been warm and peaceful, was now thick with a chilling, electric tension, and the smell of rot and dead flowers was a choking, physical presence. I felt a terrible pull at the edges of my mind, a pressure that wanted to crush my thoughts and make me a part of this new, violent chaos. The pillar, now a cracked and dying thing, was still fighting. The dark, oily smoke pouring from its wound was not just smoke. It was a physical thing, a living shadow that writhed and coiled in the air, a dark cloud of malice and rage that was forming a new shape, a new monster. It was the pillar's last defense, a final, terrible ghost of its power, and it was taking shape right in front of me, a swirling storm of pure evil. The black smoke began to form a face, a terrible, faceless mask of shifting shadows, and from the cracks in the pillar, 2 points of light, a cold, hungry green, appeared, like eyes. And the ground around me, the beautiful, starry stone, was now a cold, dead pavement, and the tiny stars were not just gone. They were crushed, leaving behind only the cold, hard rock of a tomb. I was not in a beautiful, strange hall anymore. I was standing in a terrible graveyard, surrounded by silent statues and a dying monster. The silent roar from the freed souls around me was my only company. They were not fighting. They were simply a chorus of defiance, their bright lights a silent protest against the darkness that was rising. But I knew that their light, alone, was not enough to stop this thing. I had to do something. I looked at the thousands of tiny blue pieces of the shattered compass that were fluttering in the air like dying butterflies, and I realized what they were. They were not just pieces of a tool. They were the key to this place. Each one was a tiny bit of its power, and as they drifted away, the pillar was losing its hold. The swirling, shadowy monster from the smoke lunged forward, not at me, but at the fluttering blue lights, trying to catch and consume them, to put itself back together. I had to protect them. I ran forward, a sudden, desperate energy filling my body, and I swung my arms, trying to slap the shadow monster away from the tiny lights. But it was just smoke, and my hands passed right through it. The monster laughed, a silent, terrible sound that made my ears ring, and it began to swallow the blue lights, one by one. I was failing. I was just a man with empty hands fighting against a ghost. And then I heard it. A sound that was not a silent roar. It was a whisper. A voice. It was not from the shadowy monster. It was from the statues. A single, clear whisper, a man's voice, raspy and old, that said, "Use their light." I turned and saw the knight in the rusty armor, his face still a mask of pain, but his eyes were burning with that bright, defiant fire. I looked at the Roman legionnaire. His eyes, too, were burning with a hot, clear flame. The freed souls were not just screaming. They were trying to talk to me. They were trying to help me. I looked at the fluttering blue pieces of the compass, and then I looked at my own hands, and I knew what I had to do. I had to use their light. I didn't know how, but the answer felt close, a truth just on the edge of my mind. The whisper came again, from a different statue, a man in a strange brown uniform with a thick, bushy mustache. "Weapons. They took our weapons. They took our strength." I looked at my hands again, empty and weak. And then I looked at the Roman soldier's spear. It was not real. It was a statue's spear, a part of a beautiful, empty shell. But what if it was not just a statue? What if it was a memory? I took a step towards the Roman legionnaire, and as I got closer, the bright light in his chest burned even hotter, and I heard a new sound, a deep, satisfied grunt of a man. The monster screamed, and a piece of its dark form broke off and fell to the ground, where it evaporated into a cloud of black dust. It was a miracle. It was a terrible, beautiful miracle of a dead man's soul. I was a channel. I could use the last sparks of their lives to fight this thing. I looked at the silent army around me, at the burning lights in their chests, and I knew what I had to do. I ran from statue to statue, placing my hands on their shoulders, taking their strength, their last moments, their beautiful, terrifying truths. I touched the night, and I felt the pain and strength of a man who would not yield. I touched the man in the strange hat, and I felt the knowledge of a different kind of war, a war of machines and fire. I touched the man in the strange brown coat, and I felt the cold courage of a man who died alone. With each touch, my own spirit grew stronger, and the light in the statue's chests grew brighter. I was a man, but I was also an army. I was not just Jean-Luc anymore. I was the last hope of 1,000 dead soldiers, and I had their strength, their courage, and their rage. The shadowy monster, now smaller but still fighting, screamed in pure hatred. It knew what I was doing. It knew that I was taking its food and turning it into a weapon. It lunged at me, faster this time, but I was ready. I raised my hand, and from my palm a new light shot out, a light of pure, unyielding fire, and it hit the monster in the center of its chest, right where its green eyes were. The monster shrieked, a sound that was not just pain but defeat, and then it exploded in a cloud of black dust, and the last of the blue lights, the tiny pieces of the compass, drifted down and settled on the ground. The pillar, now a dark and silent husk, stood still, its light and life gone. The terrible red sky above me began to fade, and the cold, dead ground began to feel soft and warm again. The battle was over. But I was not saved. I had won the war, but I was still trapped. The door was gone, and I was in a place of dead things and forgotten stories, and I was still just a soldier, alone. The silence that fell over the vast, beautiful hall was not the same silent calm from before. It was a silence of rest, of peace, a quiet that came after a great storm. The 1,000 tiny sparks, the freed souls, were no longer a roaring chorus. They were now a gentle, quiet light, a soft, dancing glow that surrounded the statues, like 1,000 fireflies lighting up a dark night. The statues themselves, though their eyes were still empty, seemed to have changed. Their faces, once masks of their last pain, were now peaceful, a look of quiet rest on their stone faces. Antoine stood there, just as calm as before, but the sense of emptiness that had chilled me was gone. He was still a statue, but now he was a beautiful memorial, not a tomb. The pillar, the terrible, dark husk of a machine that had stolen their souls, now stood as a silent monument to its own defeat. It was not a glowing thing of power anymore. It was just a tall, dark piece of metal, a dead giant in the center of a silent graveyard. I walked forward, my legs still shaky from the battle, and I looked down at the ground where the monster had been. The last pieces of the shattered compass, the tiny blue lights, lay scattered on the warm, starry stone. They were no longer glowing with a terrible energy. They were now like pieces of a broken mirror, reflecting the soft, new light of the hall. I bent down and picked one up. It was cold to the touch, and the faint, blue light that had once promised so much was now a quiet, gentle glow. It was just a piece of a thing that had once been powerful, a piece of a key to a world that was now closed. The door to the outside world was gone. The way back to the frozen plains of Russia, back to the war and the cold and the hunger, was closed to me. I was a prisoner in a peaceful, beautiful tomb. I walked past the silent statues, my hand still holding the cold piece of the compass. I felt a pang of sadness and of guilt. I had set them free, but I had not saved them. They were still here, in this strange place, their bodies silent and still. I had not given them their lives back. I had only given them their peace. I came to the statue of Antoine, and I stood there for a long time, looking at his calm face. His life, his soul, was somewhere else now. He was free. I had done that, at least. And as I stood there, I felt a new feeling, a strange feeling of connection. The quiet light from the freed souls was not just a light. It was a song, a quiet, humming melody that was not coming from the statues, but from the air, from the stone, from everywhere. It was a song of their lives, their stories, their triumphs, and their defeats. It was the music of 1,000 souls at peace. I closed my eyes and I listened, and I felt my own soul, my own life, begin to sing with them. It was a song of a boy from a small French town, of a father's kind hand, of a girl with a smile like a sunbeam. It was a song of my own short, terrible life as a soldier, of the fear and the hunger and the endless cold. I had not been able to fight the war in Russia, but I had fought a different war here, and I had won. But what good was winning a war if you were still trapped? I opened my eyes, and I looked at the dark, silent pillar, the monument to my victory. It stood there, a tombstone for a terrible god. And as I looked at it, I saw that on its surface, a single new symbol had appeared. It was not the symbol of a man or a soldier. It was the symbol of a circle with a single line through the center. It was a strange, simple thing, and I did not understand it. But I felt a new sense of hope bloom in my chest, a small, tiny flame that was trying to fight its way out of the darkness of my new prison. The door was gone. The compass was broken. But the pillar, even in its defeat, had left a new message. I walked to the pillar and touched the strange new symbol. The dark metal was cold, but the symbol itself was warm to the touch. It pulsed with a faint, gentle energy, a new kind of song, a different kind of promise. The humming in the air, the song of the dead souls, seemed to grow quieter, and the new symbol on the pillar began to glow. And then, from the pillar, a new light shot out, not a terrible, angry light like before, but a soft, warm, golden beam. The beam of light did not hit the ceiling or the statues. It hit the ground, and where it landed, the starry stone rippled, and a new shape began to form. It was not a door. It was not a compass. It was something else. It was the shape of a man, of a soldier, but it was not a statue. It was made of the same warm, golden light as the beam. The light man was not solid. He was a perfect, glowing ghost, and he had a musket in his hand. He looked at me, and his face was not empty. His face was filled with a warm, gentle smile, a smile that was full of kindness and a deep, ancient peace. He was a soldier, but he was a soldier who had found his way home. He raised his hand, and he pointed, not at the ground or at the pillar, but at the place where the door used to be, where the wall was now a smooth, solid surface of light. And I knew what I had to do. The door was gone, but the way out was still there. It was just a different way. I had to become like him, a ghost of light, to find my way home. The battle was over, but the journey had just begun. The golden beam of light from the defeated pillar shone brightly, and within it stood the perfect, luminous form of a soldier, a ghost made of pure, warm energy. His face, though composed of light, held a smile that was not an empty mask but was filled with a deep and ancient peace, a smile that told me he had found a kind of home that no soldier could ever find in the world of men. He pointed towards the solid wall of light where the door had been, and in that simple gesture, he gave me the only choice I had left. I looked down at my hands, at the familiar calloused skin and the dirt under my fingernails, at the tired, aching body that had carried me through the endless snows of Russia, and I knew that this body, this physical form, could not come with me. The way home was not a road to be walked or a forest to be crossed. It was a path for the soul, a journey for the very essence of a man. The cold, quiet peace of the shattered compass in my hand seemed to hum with a new, gentle rhythm, no longer a key to a tomb, but a small echo of the power I had just used. I had broken the pillar's terrible hold by channeling the souls of dead men, by becoming an army, and now, to find my way home, I had to become like them, not a statue, but a spirit. I took a deep breath, a breath that felt like the last one I would ever take, and I stepped into the golden beam of light. The moment my foot touched the light, my physical body began to hum, a deep vibration that started in my bones and spread through my muscles, a feeling of being pulled apart and put back together at the same time, but without pain, only a sensation of profound, beautiful change. The sight of the hall, the silent statues, the dark pillar, all began to blur, their solid forms becoming like watercolors in the rain, their details melting away as my own sense of reality shifted. The humming in my body grew louder, becoming a sound that was not just a vibration but 1,000 songs, the collective memory of every wound, every laugh, every moment of fear and I felt my soul, the very core of me, detached from my physical body, a feeling like a gentle hand lifting me from a chair, and when I looked down, I saw my own form, the form of Jean-Luc the soldier, standing peacefully in the light, a new statue with a calm, accepting look on its face, just like Antoine and all the others. The ache was gone, the hunger was gone, the terrible, endless fear was gone. I was just a consciousness, a spark of light, a memory floating in an ocean of gold. This new existence was not cold or frightening. It was a feeling of pure peace, of perfect calm, and all the terrible weight of my life on the frozen plains of Russia had been lifted from my shoulders as if it had never been there. The golden light man who had shown me the way was now beside me, not a shape but a presence, a kind and ancient feeling that was full of a wisdom I could not understand. He did not speak with a voice, but with a feeling that flowed into me, a feeling that said, "You are ready. The journey is not over, but the way is clear." And then he pointed, and I looked forward and saw a sight that made the light inside me sing. In the vast distance, a great river of light was flowing, a wide, endless stream of 1,000 different colors, all moving slowly towards a single, impossibly bright star at the very end of the universe, a star that pulsed with a light that was pure, absolute home. The river was made of souls, of 1,000, 1,000,000, 1,000,000,000 tiny sparks of light, each one a life, a story, a history, all flowing together in perfect harmony. These were not statues. These were the souls of the freed, the soldiers from every war who had found their way here. And as I drifted into the river of souls, I saw Antoine, a clear, beautiful light that was brighter than the others, and his light pulsed, a feeling of recognition and a feeling of thanks. He was free, and he was on his way home. I looked at the river of souls, at the countless sparks of light, and I felt a profound sense of connection, a feeling of being part of something so much larger than myself, a quiet brotherhood that spanned not just countries but time itself. As I floated in the stream, I saw the souls of the other soldiers I had helped, their lights shining brightly. I saw the Roman legionnaire, his soul a strong, steady flame of deep red, and as I passed him, I felt a memory, a flash of a field of wheat under a hot sun, a Roman mother's kiss, a story of a boy who was not yet a soldier. I felt his thanks for giving him back his peace. I saw the knight, his light a sharp, silver point, a feeling of duty and honor, and I felt his gratitude for giving him back his final courage. I saw the man with the strange hat and goggles, his soul a flickering light of 1,000 small inventions, a feeling of wonder and a love for machines, and he showed me a fleeting vision of a world of strange metal towers and flying ships, and I knew that he had found a different kind of war, and that he was going to a different kind of peace. As I went further into the river, I felt the souls of the lost soldiers, the ones who had not been able to find their way home, and their lights were dim, flickering things, and their song was a sad, quiet whisper of regret. I knew I could not leave them. My journey was not just my own. I had to guide them, to help them find their way. The river was beautiful, but it was not without its shadows. I felt them before I saw them. They were not solid things, but a cold, empty feeling, a dark hunger that floated at the edges of the river, waiting. They were the last ghosts of the pillar, the terrible hunger that had consumed the souls and left behind the beautiful, empty statues. They were trying to feed, to consume the dim, flickering souls that were still lost and confused. I felt their malice as a cold spot in the warm river, and I knew that this was the final war. I had to protect them. I gathered all the strength I had, all the collective will I had channeled from the soldiers when I had broken the pillar, and I made my own light, my own soul, burn brighter. I became a shield, a wall of pure light, and I put myself between the hungry shadows and the lost souls. I fought them, not with a musket or a sword, but with pure will, with the memory of the Roman's duty and the knight's courage and the wonder of the man with the goggles. The shadows shrieked, a silent, terrible sound of pure anger, and they tried to corrupt me, to pull me apart, but I was strong. I was not just Jean-Luc. I was an army. I was the last hope of 1,000 dead men, and their light was my shield. I fought for what felt like 1,000 years, a battle of pure spirit against pure evil. I protected the dim, flickering lights, and slowly, as I fought, the whispers of the lost souls grew stronger, becoming a quiet, determined song. They were helping me. They were fighting with me. The final shadow, the largest and most terrible of them all, a swirling cloud of pure rage, lunged for me, but it was not enough. I gathered all the light from the 1,000 souls, from the Roman and the knight and Antoine, from all the men who had given me their courage, and I focused it all into a single, burning point of pure light. The light was not a weapon. It was a truth. It was the truth of who they were, of their lives, of their home, and it hit the shadow with the force of 1,000,000 suns. The shadow screamed, a silent, final cry of defeat, and then it simply ceased to exist, melting away into nothingness. The river of souls was now clean, and it flowed in a perfect, peaceful stream towards the bright, welcoming star in the distance. I had won. But I was not saved. My journey was not over. The light man who had guided me now stood beside me, and he did not speak with a voice, but with a feeling that said, "You have found your purpose, soldier. The journey home is not just for you. It is for all of them." I looked at the river of souls, at the countless lights flowing to a home they had not yet seen, and I knew he was right. I could go home. I could pass into that bright star and find my family, my peace. But what would happen to the new souls, the new soldiers from 1,000 different wars, who would one day find their way to this place, lost and afraid, needing a guide? I had found a new war to fight, a new kind of duty. My battle was over, but my work had just begun. I was no longer just a soldier in Napoleon's army. I was a guardian of the lost, a watcher of the way home, and I stood at the edge of the river of souls, my own light a beacon, waiting for the next brave soul to come and find its way to peace. And as I stood there, watching the river of souls flow past me, my own light a steady, quiet beacon, I knew that this was my home. This was my purpose. This was a new kind of duty, a new kind of war, and it was a war I would fight forever. My timeless watch at the river's edge was not a passive existence. It was an act of constant, quiet awareness. I was not just a sentinel. I was a student, learning the very language of existence. I learned to read the stories not just from the light of each passing soul, but from the faint echoes they left in the air, in the subtle changes in the river's flow, in the fleeting shapes they momentarily formed. I saw a soul of a young boy, a musician, whose light was a complex melody of notes that told the story of a peaceful village, a family gathered around a fire, and the silent, terrible moment when the music stopped. I guided his soul, a gentle hum of my own light, a promise that the music would continue, and I felt his gratitude as he flowed into the main stream, his melody now a part of the greater song. The great, bright star at the end of the universe was not just a destination, it was a home, a final rest, and every soul that flowed into it was a story that had found its perfect ending. I knew I could not go there yet. My own story was not finished. My purpose was to help the ones who were still lost, the ones whose stories had been broken by the war. I learned to sense the moment a new soul would arrive, a new, frightened flicker of light that would appear at the very edge of this world, tumbling and lost, a painful echo of my own arrival. My approach was now calm and practiced. I would not rush, for fear would only make them recoil. I would simply stand nearby, my light a steady, quiet beacon, a safe harbor in a world of confusion. I would let them see me, a soldier like them, but at peace. I would wait for them to come to me, to seek the calm that my light represented. The first few times they were wary, their lights flickering with suspicion, their memories a jumble of painful thoughts, betrayal from a friend, the cold order of a commander, the pointless death of a fellow soldier. But I would just wait, a silent, patient presence, and slowly, they would feel the peace that radiated from me, and they would move closer. And when they were ready, I would share my story, a silent, telepathic flow of memory and feeling. I would show them the cold, the hunger, the terrible fear of a man lost in the snow. I would show them the compass, the siren song of the pillar, the beautiful and terrible lie. And then I would show them the truth, the silent, brave battle of the 1,000 dead souls, the defiance of the tiny, flickering lights, the final, victorious explosion of 1,000 suns. I would show them Antoine, my friend, and his final, peaceful journey home. I would show them that this was not a tomb, but a road, a final, long-awaited march to a home they had not yet seen. The souls would listen, their lights growing steadier and brighter as they understood. The fear would leave their light, and in its place would come a quiet, determined courage. I would then guide them, a gentle push of my light, to the river, and I would watch as they joined the endless stream, their song now a part of the greater melody of existence. My work was not just about guiding the lost. It was also about protecting the river itself. The terrible shadows of the pillar, though defeated, had not been completely destroyed. They were now just tiny, insignificant things, little motes of darkness that floated at the edges of the river, waiting for a weak, lost soul to pass by. They were not a threat to the mainstream, but they were a threat to the lost and the broken, the very souls I had sworn to protect. So, I would also be a fighter, a warrior of a new kind. I would sense the shadows as a cold spot in the warmth of the river, and I would push my light towards them, a gentle, but firm force that would not allow them to get close. They would recoil, their dark forms shrinking from my light, and they would retreat, but they would always be there, a constant reminder that my work was never truly over. The days and nights of the world of men no longer had meaning for me. I was a being of a timeless place, and I had a timeless duty. I was a guardian of the lost, a watcher of the way home, a beacon of peace in a world that was still filled with 1,000 years of war. And I would stand at the edge of the river of souls, my own light a steady, quiet beacon, waiting for the next brave soul to come and find its way to peace. And as I stood there, a new soul arrived. Not a broken, flickering thing of dim, gray light, but a soul that was full of a bright, fierce rage. It was a soldier, but it was a warrior of a different kind. It was not a man, but a woman, and her soul was a brilliant, burning flame of pure, unyielding anger. Her memories were a jumble of flashes, a battlefield of steel machines and fire, a shattered city, a child's cry, and the final, terrible image of a flag on fire. Her soul was not lost, it was a weapon. And she was not looking for peace. She was looking for a war. And I knew that my next battle, my next test, would not be to guide a lost soul home, but to calm a warrior's raged out and timeless watch, a silent and patient duty, was a testament to the new man I had become, a being of light and memory. But the soul that arrived was a direct challenge to all I had learned. It did not flicker with fear or dim with confusion. It burned. It was a brilliant, burning flame of pure, unyielding anger, a light that was so fierce it seemed to push back the quiet calm of the river of souls, its heat a cold, hard presence in the golden air. I had expected a frightened soul, a broken thing to be comforted, but this was a warrior, a fighter who had come to this world with her weapons still drawn. Her memories were not a jumble of painful confusion, but a clear, powerful storm of violent flashes that hit my light like physical blows. I saw a battlefield, not of men in lines with muskets, but a place of steel machines, of great, roaring monsters that spat fire and iron. I saw a sky choked with dark, oily smoke, and cities reduced to shattered, gray dust. I saw her, a young woman in a uniform I did not recognize, her face a mask of determination, her hands gripping a strange, powerful weapon. I saw a flash of a beautiful, old city, with towering buildings of glass and steel, and then I saw it burn, a terrible inferno that consumed everything, and I felt her scream, not of pain, but of pure, helpless rage. Her soul was not lost. It was a weapon, and it was looking for the source of its anger. It was looking for the enemy, and in its blinding rage, it could not see that the war was over. I pushed my light forward, my usual approach of calm and patience. I reached out to her, a gentle, soothing hum of peace, but her light recoiled violently, a sharp, angry jolt that sent a tremor through my own being. Her rage was a shield, a wall of fire that would not let me in. She did not want peace. She wanted justice. She wanted revenge. Her light pulsed with a powerful question, a demand. "Where is the enemy?" I had no answers for her, no enemy to show her, for the war she had fought had ended long ago, in a world that was no longer hers. I had to find a different way. My usual tactics, my stories of Antoine and the compass, of the long march and the final, peaceful journey home, were useless. She would see them as the stories of a weak man, a man who had given up the fight. She did not want to be a part of a peaceful chorus of souls. She wanted to fight. I knew I had to meet her in her own battlefield, to acknowledge her rage before I could hope to calm it. I changed my approach. I pulled back my light, but I did not retreat. Instead, I let my light change, becoming not a beacon of peace but a point of pure, unyielding strength. I showed her my own memories, not of the fear and the hunger, but of the charge at Borodino, of the final, desperate battle against the shadowy monster in the hall. I showed her my defiance, my refusal to become a statue, my will to fight. My song changed, becoming not a gentle melody, but a steady, unbreakable rhythm of a soldier's march, a beat of pure, determined will. She saw me then. She did not see a man of peace, but a man of war, a warrior like her, and her light calmed, just a little. The questions in her soul changed, a new demand. Show me the fight. Show me the war you fought. And so I did. I showed her the silent, brave battle of the 1,000 dead souls, the defiance of the tiny, flickering lights. I showed her the quiet courage of the Roman legionnaire, the unyielding will of the knight in the rusty armor, the cold, determined defiance of all the men who had refused to become empty shells. I showed her the final, victorious explosion of 1,000 suns, the death of the terrible pillar. And as she saw the war I had fought, the rage in her soul began to change. It was no longer a wild, destructive flame, but a hot, contained fire of respect. She had found a warrior in a world of peace, and in that she had found a common ground. But the rage was not gone. It was still there, a bright, burning core of anger that kept her from the river. I sensed the source of her anger, the final, unhealed wound in her soul. I saw a little girl, a small, frightened child hiding in the rubble of a shattered city, her eyes wide with fear, her tiny hand holding the hand of her father, a man in a simple suit. I saw the flash of an explosion, and then nothing. The girl was gone. Her rage was not for her own death. It was for the death of that child, for the innocent lives that had been consumed by the terrible, pointless war. Her rage was a shield against her own helplessness. She had not been able to save the child, and so she had become a weapon, a burning flame of anger to make sure that no one would ever feel that helplessness again. I knew I could not guide her to peace by telling her to let go of her anger. It was her protection, her purpose. I had to show her a new purpose. I took a deep breath, and I reached out my light again, not as a shield or a weapon, but as a hand. I showed her the river of souls, but not as a place of rest. I showed her the river as a journey, a path for the lost, the broken, and the innocent. I showed her the souls of children, their lights small and flickering, lost and afraid, victims of 1,000 different wars. I showed her the souls of mothers, fathers, and simple, peaceful people who had died in the wake of 1,000 conflicts, their lights dim with confusion and sadness. I showed her that the war was not over, that the lost still needed a guide, that the innocent still needed a protector. I showed her that her anger, her rage, her brilliant, burning flame could be a powerful thing, not for destruction, but for guidance. I showed her that she could be a fire to guide them, a beacon to protect them, a warrior to watch over them. Her light pulsed, a feeling of shock, of understanding, and of a profound new purpose. Her rage did not disappear. It simply changed. The wild, destructive fire was now a controlled and purposeful flame, a beacon of pure, protective will. She was still a warrior, but she was now a guardian. She was no longer fighting for a war that was lost. She was fighting for a peace that was yet to be found. She turned her light to me, and I felt her gratitude, a fierce, burning thanks that was like nothing I had ever felt before. And then, she moved towards the river, not with a gentle flow, but with a determined march, her light a brilliant, burning torch at the edge of the stream. She had found her purpose, her duty, and she had become a part of the long, silent march to a home she had not yet seen. I was no longer a soldier in Napoleon's army. I was a guardian of the lost, a watcher of the way home, and I stood at the edge of the river of souls, my own light a steady, quiet beacon, waiting for the next brave soul to come and find its way to peace. And as I stood there, another soul arrived. Not a broken, flickering thing of dim, gray light, or a soul that was full of a bright, fierce rage. This was a soul of pure, unadulterated madness. Its light was a chaotic, swirling storm of violent, my timeless watch, a duty that had settled into a rhythm of calm patience and quiet guidance, was shattered by its arrival. This soul did not arrive as a frightened flicker or a determined flame. It arrived as a violent, churning maelstrom, a chaotic storm of violent, contradictory colors, a shocking, painful mix of deep, blood red and cold corpse blue, a sick, swirling yellow and a sharp, angry orange that clashed with a jarring, discordant scream of pure white light. The sound it emitted was not a song or a whisper, but a terrible jumble of noise, a silent scream that was deafening, a mad laugh that was full of pain, the sharp, rhythmic crack of a rifle and the soft, sad hum of a child's toy, all mashed together into a single, terrifying chord that vibrated through the very fabric of my being. Its memories were a broken, nonsensical mess, a terrifying dream of a war that had not just ended a life, but had broken a mind. I saw flashes of soldiers walking on the ceiling, of rivers of blood flowing uphill, of the sun turning black in the middle of the day. The very laws of this world, the quiet, peaceful order I had come to understand, were being challenged by the pure, unadulterated madness of this one soul. The calm of the river of souls was disturbed, its gentle flow rippling with unease, the lights of the passing spirits recoiling from the terrifying storm. My own light, a steady, quiet beacon, felt the pressure, a powerful force that wanted to pull me into the madness, to make me a part of its chaos. I knew that my usual methods were useless here. I could not offer it peace, for it did not know what peace was. I could not show it a battle, for it was still fighting a war that was no longer real. I had to find a different way, a way to reach a soul that was completely broken, to find a single, coherent piece of humanity in a storm of pure chaos. My first instinct was to shield the river, to protect the peaceful souls from this terrifying storm, but I knew that I could not simply let this soul drift, lost forever in its own personal hell. It was a soldier, a man who had been taken by the war, and he had a right to find his way home. So I pushed my light forward, not as a shield, but as a path. I did not try to enter the storm of his memories. I created a new memory, a new path, a path of calm and peace, and I projected it towards him, a single, steady line of warm, golden light that was the opposite of everything he was experiencing. The soul, the terrifying storm, reacted violently. It lunged at my light, trying to consume it, to twist it into another part of its chaos, but my light was strong. It did not bend. It did not break. It was a simple, unyielding truth in a world of lies, and the soul, in its madness, was fascinated. It stopped its violent, random lurching and began to circle my light, its colors still clashing, its song still broken, but it was watching. It was observing. And in that moment of stillness, I knew I had found a way in. I would not enter his madness. I would wait for him to find his way out. I would be a quiet, unmoving rock in a storm, a single point of order in a world of chaos, and I would wait for the moment when he was ready to grasp the hand I was offering. For a timeless, endless period, I stood there, my light a quiet beacon, and the soul, the mad, terrifying storm, circled me, a constant, howling wind of pure madness. I saw the fragments of his life, not in a coherent story, but in a series of violent, disconnected flashes. I saw a memory of a battlefield, a place of trenches and mud and barbed wire, but the soldiers were not men. They were shadows, silent, faceless ghosts who walked in a slow, endless march. I saw a memory of a face, a woman with kind, sad eyes, but her face was not solid. It was a shifting, watery image that was half-formed and then gone. I saw a memory of a peaceful field of flowers, but the flowers were made of glass and they shattered and fell to the ground with the sound of 1,000 broken screams. His memories were a prison, a beautiful, terrible hell that he could not escape. I felt his pain, a terrible, sharp agony that was not from a physical wound, but from a broken mind. He was trying to make sense of a world that had gone completely mad, and he was failing. He was drowning in his own chaos. And then I found it. It was not a grand, powerful memory. It was a tiny, insignificant thing, a single, clear, peaceful moment in a sea of madness. It was a memory of a quiet room, a small, worn book, a hand turning a page, and the feeling of the sun on a cheek. It was a memory of a moment before the war, a moment of pure, simple peace. It was a memory of a boy who was not yet a soldier, a man who was not yet mad. I reached out and took that single, tiny memory, and I held it in my own light, a gentle, warm, and steady glow. The storm of his soul, the chaos of his colors and his sounds, all seemed to quiet, just for a moment, as he saw that tiny, peaceful memory, a single point of truth in a world of lies. It was a thread. I had found the thread, and now I had to use it to pull him back. I did not try to show him the whole memory. I simply held it, a small, constant beacon of peace. And I waited. I waited for him to reach for it. And slowly, a tiny, faint, quiet light, a light that was a beautiful, clear blue, detached itself from the storm and moved towards my light. It was his soul, a small, tiny piece of him that had not been corrupted by the madness. I wrapped my light around it, and I did not let go. I held it in my own peace, and I showed it the quiet, beautiful river of souls, the warm, golden light of the path home. The madness, the terrible storm, began to howl and rage, a sound of pure anger, as it tried to pull the soul back, to consume it completely. But I was stronger. My light was a fortress, and I held the tiny soul, and I did not let go. I stood there, a quiet, unyielding rock, and I waited for the storm to rage itself out. It raged for what felt like 1,000 years, a violent, terrible battle of pure spirit. The chaotic colors of his madness flashed and screamed, and the jumbled memories of his broken mind tried to pull me in, to make me a part of their chaos. But I was not just Jean-Luc. I was an army, a guardian, a bastion of peace, and I held on, and I did not let go. And slowly, the storm began to lessen. The rage became a whisper, the clashing colors became a quiet, sad gray, and the terrifying whispers and screams became a single, quiet sob. The storm was over. The soul, the man, was still there, but the madness was gone. His light was no longer a terrifying storm, but a quiet, sad, beautiful light, a light that held the terrible memories of his past, but was no longer ruled by them. I held him for a long, long time, until his light was steady and his soul was at peace. And then, with a gentle push of my own light, I guided him to the river, and I watched as his soul, a quiet, sad, beautiful light, flowed into the stream, its song a quiet, sorrowful melody that was a new, beautiful note in the great song of existence. I had not just guided a lost soul. I had healed a broken one. My duty, my purpose, had grown again. I was no longer just a watcher. I was a healer. I stood at the edge of the river of souls, my own light a steady, quiet beacon, waiting for the next brave soul to come and find its way to peace. I was no longer just a soldier. I was a guardian, a healer, and a watcher of the way home. My journey was not over. It had just begun. And I would be ready for whatever came next. A soldier who had become a guardian, a healer, and a creator, forever changed by the terrible beauty of the souls he had saved. The rhythm of my timeless watch was no longer just one of calm and patience. It was a rhythm of endless growth, a constant learning of the different ways a soul could be broken and the different ways it could be healed. I had learned to guide the lost, to calm the enraged, and to heal the mad. But the universe, in its endless and terrible wisdom, had one more challenge for me, a challenge that was not of rage or of madness, but of something far more frightening, nothing. The next soul to arrive was not a flicker of fear or a flame of anger or a storm of chaos. It was an absence. A perfect, unblemished void. It was a hole in the air, a cold, still darkness where a soul should have been. There was no light, no color, no sound, no memory. There was no story to read, no song to hear, no thread to grasp. There was just an emptiness, a perfect, absolute zero in a world of light and life. The calm of the river was not disturbed. The passing souls did not recoil. They simply flowed around the void, a silent, empty space that was a perfect, unmoving spot in the eternal stream. It was as if this soul had never existed. It was not a broken thing. It was an unmade thing. My own light, my own essence, felt a profound, chilling cold, a cold that was not from a lack of heat, but from a lack of being. It was a cold that wanted to consume me, to make me a part of its own perfect, empty nothingness. My usual methods, my usual purpose, had no meaning here. How do you guide something that has no will to be guided? How do you heal something that has no wound? How do you give a voice to something that has no song? This was not a battle. This was an impossibility. My first instinct was to retreat, to shield myself from the terrible emptiness. but I knew I could not. It was a soul, a soldier, a life that had ended, and it had a right to find its way home, even if it had no idea what home was. I pushed my light forward, a steady, quiet beacon of warmth, and I watched as my light simply vanished into the void, absorbed without a trace. It did not recoil or lash out, it just ceased to exist. It was a complete, final, and absolute end. My light had found no resistance, no will, no being, and it had simply been consumed by a perfect, silent black hole. I had to find a different way. I had to find a way to create something where there was nothing. I went to the statues, the silent, peaceful monuments of the men I had saved. I went to Antoine, my friend, and I touched his peaceful, empty form. I pulled on his memory, not of his last moments, but of his life, a memory of his simple, kind soul, a memory of his love for his family, and I gathered it into a single, warm, glowing point of light, a perfect, beautiful spark of a good and simple man. I took that spark, that tiny, precious bit of Antoine's humanity, and I pushed it towards the void. The result was instantaneous and terrifying. The void reacted, not with violence, but with a terrible, silent hunger. It began to pull on the spark, to stretch and pull it apart, to consume it in a slow, painful process of unmaking. The memory of Antoine's life, his love, his kindness, was being torn to shreds, his very essence being erased. I pulled the spark back, a wave of profound guilt and regret washing over me. I had nearly destroyed the one thing I had fought so hard to save. I knew I could not use their memories, their souls, to fill this void. I had to find a different way. I looked at the void, at the terrible, unmoving hole in the universe, and I felt a new kind of despair. This was a soul that had been broken so completely, a life that had ended in such an act of final, absolute terror, that it had simply ceased to be. It had not just lost its memories. It had lost its very humanity, its very reason for existence. I knew that I had to give it something of my own. I had to create a new beginning, to find a spark of life where there was none. I reached into my own light, my own essence, and I looked for the most precious, most sacred memory I had, a memory that was the very foundation of who I was. I found it. It was not a memory of a battle or of a great victory. It was a simple, quiet memory of my father, his kind hand on my shoulder, his voice a quiet, calm presence in the middle of a beautiful, sunlit field of flowers. It was the memory of a boy who was not yet a soldier, a moment of pure, innocent peace, the very beginning of my story. I took that memory, that tiny, precious bit of my own soul, and I held it out. This time, I did not push it into the void. I simply held it, a single, constant beacon of pure, simple humanity, a memory of a boy and a father, of a kind hand and a quiet voice, a memory of a time before any war, any madness, any emptiness. The void reacted, not with a hungry pulling, but with a strange, hesitant stillness. It was a different kind of reaction, not of a predator, but of a lost child. The memory was not being consumed. It was being observed. I held it for a timeless, endless period, my own light beginning to dim as the memory of my father, my own cherished past, began to slowly fade, to be given to this empty, broken soul. The cost was great, but I knew I had to pay it. The void began to change, a faint, almost invisible light, a pale, milky white, a color that was not a color, began to form at its center, a single, tiny, almost unseen spark. It was a response. It was a new beginning. I pushed more of my own light, more of my own essence, into the void, a gentle, steady flow of my own being, a selfless act of creation. The milky light grew, slowly, slowly, into a faint, wispy cloud, a beautiful, pale nebula of an unformed soul, and from the edges of the cloud, a single, tiny, almost silent hum, a sound that was not a sound, but a feeling of a question, began to resonate. I had done it. I had given it a spark. I had given it a beginning. The void was gone, replaced by a new, tiny, fragile soul, a soul that had no memories, no past, but it had a future. It had a spark of life, a feeling of pure, simple curiosity. I had not just guided a lost soul, healed a broken one, or calmed a mad one. I had created a new one, a soul that had been lost and found again in the silence of its own ending. I looked at the new, fragile soul, and I knew that my duty was not over. My purpose had grown again. I was no longer just a watcher, a healer, or a guardian. I was a creator, a bringer of light to the darkness, a life-giver in a world of ghosts. But the cost was high. The memory of my father, the kind hand on my shoulder, the quiet voice, was gone from me. It had been given away, a piece of myself that was now a part of a new life, a new beginning. My own light was dimmer now, its song a little quieter, its essence a little less full. I had given a part of my own home away to a stranger, and I was changed forever. I looked at my own light, at the small, empty space where my most cherished memory had been, and I knew that this was the final, terrible price of my purpose. My journey was not over. It had just begun. And I would be ready for whatever came next, a soldier who had become a guardian, a healer, and a creator, forever changed by the terrible beauty of the souls he had saved. And my journey, a timeless watch in a world of ghosts, was still not over. It had just begun. I was a guardian, a healer, a creator, but the greatest challenge, the final test, was still to come. After the void, after the perfect, chilling absence of a soul, I expected a new, strange form of being, a new kind of brokenness. But what arrived was the most shocking of all. A soul that was not broken, but was whole. A soul that was not a dim flicker or a raging flame, or a churning storm, or a terrifying void. A soul that was a perfect, pure, beautiful golden light, a light that hummed with a melody so beautiful and so pure it made the very river of souls around it sing in harmony. It was a soul that had found its way here, not by accident, not by a terrible, violent death, but by a perfect, peaceful ending. A soul that was so completely at peace, so whole and so full of a life well lived, that it had no need of my guidance. It was a soul of a man who had died in his sleep, surrounded by his family, his last breath a sigh of contentment. He had found his way to this place, to the very entrance of the river of souls, and he did not seem to know that I was there. He simply stood, a perfect, beautiful golden light, his song a peaceful, satisfied hum. He was a man who had lived his life well, and he had come to the end of his journey, and he was ready for his final rest. But this was a problem. A terrible, profound problem. The system, the quiet, unspoken laws of this place, were not set up for a soul like this. The laws were for the broken, the lost, the maddened, the empty. The laws were for soldiers, for lives that had been taken by violence and fear. The system was not set up for a soul that was whole. He did not need a guide. He did not need a healer. He did not need a creator. He was a perfect, complete thing, a final, unblemished work of art. The river of souls, which had always flowed towards the bright, welcoming star, began to hesitate. The light from the star, the warm, golden light of home, began to flicker, a confused and anxious hum. The system was trying to understand a soul that it could not understand. It was trying to find a wound that was not there. It was trying to heal a soul that was already whole. And in its confusion, it began to change, to distort. The quiet, peaceful hum of the river began to waver, to become a jumbled mess of 1,000 confused questions. The golden light of the star began to pulse, a chaotic, uncertain rhythm, a feeling of panic that was spreading through the very fabric of this place. The void, the terrible emptiness I had just healed, was a wound, and the system knew how to deal with a wound. It knew how to heal it, how to guide it, how to find a new beginning. But this soul, this perfect, whole soul, was not a wound. It was a perfect, unblemished truth, and the system had no way to process it. It was like a machine that was made to fix broken things, and it was faced with a thing that was not broken. The machine was breaking down. I had to do something. I had to find a way to help this man, this perfect soul, to find his way home, before his very presence, his very perfection, broke this place completely. I moved forward, a soldier who had become a guardian, a healer, a creator, and now, a way to explain perfection to a system that only understood brokenness. I looked at the man's soul, at the perfect, beautiful golden light, and I felt its pure, untroubled calm. He was not aware of the chaos he was causing. He was simply waiting for his turn to go home, a simple, peaceful, and perfect act of trust. I knew I could not touch him, for my light, my own soul, was scarred and changed by 1,000 battles, and my imperfections would only confuse him. I had to find a way to communicate with the system itself, the very fabric of this place. I reached out, not to the soul, but to the very air, to the very hum of the river, and I began to sing a new song. A song that was not a warrior's song, or a healer's song, or a creator's song. It was a song of perfect harmony, a song that was both whole and broken at the same time. I sang a song of a soldier who had found his way home, but had given a part of his home away to a stranger. I sang a song of a warrior whose anger had become a shield, a fire to protect the lost. I sang a song of a man who had found his way back to a single, quiet memory of peace. I sang a song of a void that had been filled with a new, beautiful beginning. I sang a song that was both a wound and a healing, a loss and a finding, a sorrow and a peace. My song was a testament to the terrible, beautiful truth that a soul can be both broken and whole at the same time, that the scars of a life can be just as beautiful as the innocence of a beginning. My song was a bridge. It was a bridge between the broken system and the perfect soul. The river began to calm. The anxious hum of the passing souls began to quiet. The light from the star, the light of home, began to steady. The system was listening. It was trying to understand a new kind of language. And as I sang, I felt a powerful feeling of recognition flow from the system, a feeling of pure, profound understanding. It had understood. It had found a new law, a new way to process a soul that was whole. It was the law of empathy. It was the law that the broken and the whole could exist in the same space, that the scars of a life could be a beautiful part of its final story. The river, with a gentle, final hum of understanding, began to flow again, and a new path opened up, not just for the perfect soul, but for all the souls that would come after him. A path that was not just for the lost and the broken, but for the whole and the perfect as well. The golden soul, the man who had lived his life well, simply smiled, a perfect, peaceful, and unseeing smile, and he flowed into the river, a beautiful, golden light, a final, perfect note in the great song of existence. I had done it. I had not just guided a soul. I had changed the very laws of this place. I was no longer a soldier. I was a guardian, a healer, a creator, and a lawmaker. And my journey, a timeless watch in a world of ghosts, was still not over. It had just begun. I had learned to guide the lost, to calm the enraged, to heal the mad, and to give a new beginning to the empty. But the universe, in its endless and terrible wisdom, had one more challenge for me, a challenge that was not of rage or of madness, but of a profound and impossible paradox. The next soul to arrive was the most shocking of all, not because it was broken, but because it was both perfect and broken at the same time, an impossible duality that defied every law I had come to understand. This soul was not a flicker of fear or a flame of anger or a churning storm or a terrifying void. It was a living contradiction, a swirling, intricate tapestry of light and shadow, of creation and destruction, a perfect harmony of opposing forces. The light within it was a perfect, pure, beautiful golden glow, humming with a melody so beautiful and so pure it made the very river of souls around it sing in harmony, a light that spoke of immense love, of cities built from nothing, of lives saved and a utopia created by this being's boundless will and genius. And intertwined with this beautiful light, a perfect and seamless part of its very being, was a cold, still darkness, a shadow that hummed with a melody so dark and so sorrowful it made the very river of souls around it shiver with unease, a shadow that spoke of terrible sacrifice, of lives crushed in the name of progress, of the silent, unheeded screams of those who were displaced, and the beautiful things that were destroyed to make way for the new. The light and the shadow did not clash, they did not fight. They existed in a perfect, unsettling balance, a duality that was not a conflict to be resolved, but a fundamental truth of this soul's existence. He was a conqueror and a creator, a destroyer and a healer, a being of both immense good and immense harm, and the two were so inseparably intertwined that one could not be separated from the other without unmaking the entire soul. My usual methods, the laws I had just helped to establish, were useless here. How do you guide a soul that has already found its way and yet cannot move forward? How do you heal a wound that is not a wound, but a core part of a being? How do you explain a law of empathy to a soul that is the very embodiment of the paradox? My light, which had learned to be a guide, a shield, and a creator, felt a profound confusion, a sense of being faced with an unsolvable riddle. I could not touch him, for my light, with its scars of 1,000 battles, would only try to resolve his contradiction, to separate the light from the shadow, an act that would shatter him completely. I watched as the river of souls, which had just learned to accept the whole with the broken, now faced a new and impossible challenge. The golden star at the end of the universe, the final home, began to pulse, its light wavering with a profound feeling of panic. It had no way to process this soul. The conqueror's song was both a welcome and a warning, a beautiful melody and a terrible scream, and the star, which only understood the perfect peace of a final rest, was being pulled in two directions at once. The system, the quiet, unspoken laws of this place, which I had helped to change, were now being tested to their very core. This was not a problem of a broken thing. This was a problem of a new, unforeseen law of existence, a law that I had to discover and explain. I knew I had to find a new way, a way to help this soul find its rest without destroying the very fabric of this place. I had to find a way to make a perfect paradox fit into a system that only understood resolution. It was a final, impossible test, and I knew that this was the one battle I could not win with a sword, with a shield, with a memory, or with a simple song. I had to find a new way. I looked at the soul, at the perfect, impossible balance of light and shadow, and I understood that I could not change it. I had to change the system. I had to create a new way for the soul to exist. I had to show the system that this soul was not a problem to be solved, but a truth to be accepted. I reached out, not to the soul, but to the very air, to the very hum of the river, and I began to sing a new song, a symphony of all the souls I had saved. I pulled on the silent courage of the Roman legionnaire, the unyielding will of the knight in the rusty armor, the quiet strength of Antoine, the determined spirit of the warrior woman, the peaceful melody of the healed man, the nascent hum of the created void, and the perfect harmony of the whole soul. I wove them all together into a complex symphony of contradictions, a song that was both beautiful and terrible, both sorrowful and triumphant. My symphony was a narrative of duality. It told the story of how brokenness could lead to healing, how loss could lead to creation, how conflict could lead to a different kind of peace. It showed the system that a soul could hold both light and shadow, both creation and destruction, without being a paradox to be solved, but a truth to be accepted. The river began to listen, its peaceful hum growing into a powerful, resonant chord. The star began to pulse, not with panic, but with a new, profound feeling of understanding. The system was learning. It was learning a new kind of language. And as I sang, I felt a new law flow into being, a new path, a new way home. It was not a path to the river. It was a path that ran parallel to the river, a path of eternal, necessary work, a path for the souls that were both perfect and broken, for the conquerors and the creators, for the ones who changed the world at a terrible cost. The soul of the conqueror did not flow into the river or the star. It began to walk a new, timeless march on this new path, its light and shadow in perfect, beautiful balance. And I knew that this soul would not find rest, but a new kind of duty, a duty to help other souls like itself navigate this new path. And I, the soldier who had become a guardian, a healer, a creator, and a lawmaker, was now a cartographer of this new, unseen territory of the soul. My watch was not just at the river's edge, but at the beginning of all the different paths home. And I would be ready for whatever came next, forever changed by the terrible beauty of the souls I had saved and the terrible, beautiful laws I had helped to create. My new duty, the quiet and profound purpose I had taken on, was no longer confined to the river's edge, for I was now a cartographer of the unseen territory of the soul, a silent explorer of the metaphysical landscapes that lay beyond the final march, and my existence expanded, my light stretching out like a vast, living map that traced the newly forged paths, the intricate highways of spirit that branched out from the main golden river, each one a testament to a different kind of life and a different kind of ending. I was no longer a sentry, a fixed point of light, but a silent, moving beacon, an ever-present guide at the beginning of all the different roads home, and my work was not just to welcome the newly arrived but to understand the very nature of their being, to see the unmapped territory of their existence, and to find the perfect, quiet path that would lead them to a final, perfect peace. A duty that required an endless, patient curiosity and a profound, silent empathy. That reached beyond the simple narratives of fear, rage, and madness, and into the complex, beautiful, and terrifying contradictions of every soul's unique journey. I watched as the golden river flowed, a constant, peaceful stream, but my attention was now on the new paths, the nascent currents of light that pulsed with a different kind of energy, each one a different kind of ending, and I began to name them in my heart, giving them a silent, internal lexicon that helped me to understand the new world I now inhabited. There was the path of the unfinished symphony, a winding, ethereal road of half-formed melodies and silent notes that belonged to the artists, the creators, the ones who had died with their magnum opus still in their heart, a path that was not about conflict or resolution but about the profound, aching sorrow of potential unfulfilled, and their souls, beautiful, chaotic bursts of color and sound, would arrive at the crossroads, their songs a jumbled, desperate plea for a final, perfect chord, a last brushstroke, and my task was not to fix their work, for that was an impossibility, but to guide them to a new kind of harmony. A harmony that came not from completion but from acceptance, a beautiful, peaceful hum that told them that their unfinished work was a perfect part of the great song of existence, and that their final, unsung note was the most beautiful of all. I also saw the path of the labyrinthine mind, a cold, crystalline road of pure logic and flawless, sterile calculation, a path that belonged to the scientists, the philosophers, the ones who had sought to understand the universe through reason alone, and their souls, sharp, brilliant points of silver light, would arrive at the crossroads, their beings a constant, humming question, a demand for a final, perfect equation that would explain it all, and my task was not to provide them with the answer, for there was none, but to show them the beauty in the chaos, to introduce them to the illogical, beautiful truth of this place, the fact that a soul could be both a wave and a particle, both whole and broken at the same time, a concept that defied all their laws, and I would sing to them a new song, a song of pure, unadulterated beauty, a song that had no logic, no reason, and I would watch as their cold, brilliant light began to soften, a beautiful, swirling nebula of acceptance and wonder, and their perfect, silent questions would be replaced by a profound and peaceful hum of pure awe, and they would find their way home, a final march not of logic but of feeling. My new duty also took me to the path of the unkept promise, a sorrowful, gray road of silent echoes and unheard whispers that belonged to the politicians, the leaders, the ones who had sought to change the world but had been consumed by the terrible machinery of power, their souls, once bright and full of a grand ambition, now a flickering, gray thing of profound regret, their journey a constant, sorrowful reliving of every impossible choice, every silent lie, and my task was not to absolve them, for that was a task for the universe itself, but to show them the smaller, quieter truths of their lives, the small, unnoticed acts of kindness, the single, unspoken word of comfort, the tiny, human moments that had been forgotten in the grand narrative of their ambition, and I would show them that their legacy was not in the great cities they had built but in the single, small lives they had touched, and their souls, now a quiet, sorrowful light, would find a new kind of peace, a peace that came not from power but from a quiet, profound understanding of a life well lived, and they would find their way home, a final, unspoken march of quiet humility. But my work was not just to guide the newly arrived. I was a cartographer, a mapmaker, and I was also a protector of the very paths I had helped to create. I began to sense a new kind of threat, not from the shadows of the pillar, which were now just a distant, forgotten memory, but from something far more subtle and far more terrifying, a silent, quiet forgetting, a profound and slow erosion of the very memories that made up the paths. It was a cold, quiet silence that began at the edges of the paths, a slow, gentle unmaking of the memories that made them up, a terrible entropy that sought to turn all the beautiful, different paths back into the empty, silent void I had once healed. I saw the path of the unfinished symphony begin to lose its melody, its beautiful, broken notes, being slowly erased into a single, quiet drone of nothingness. I saw the path of the labyrinthine mind begin to lose its cold, silver light, its flawless calculations being replaced by a silent, senseless noise. I saw the path of the unkept promise begin to lose its silent echoes, its grey road becoming a blank, featureless expanse of unbeing. This was not a battle I could fight with a sword or a shield or a song. This was a battle against silence itself, a battle against the very nature of unmaking. I was the cartographer, and I knew that if I did not act, the map would be gone, and all the paths would be erased, and the universe would be left with only the river of souls and the final, empty void. So I began a new kind of duty. I began to walk the paths, my light a quiet, powerful presence that fought back the silence, my own memories a constant, living testament to the truth of each path. I would walk the path of the unfinished symphony, my light a quiet, beautiful hum that would reawaken the melodies, my own memories of the silent courage of the thousand dead souls a constant, living song that told the path that a soul's song was never truly finished. I would walk the path of the labyrinthine mind, my light a warm, golden presence that would reawaken the beautiful, illogical truth of existence, my own memories of the boy who was not yet a soldier a constant, living proof that a soul was more than just a calculation. I would walk the path of the unkept promise, my light a quiet, sorrowful beacon that would reawaken the silent echoes, my own memories of the terrible beauty of my own journey a constant, living reminder that a soul's legacy was not in its triumphs but in its quiet, human struggles. My work was an endless act of remembrance, a constant, tireless fight against the silent, slow march of forgetting. And I knew that this was my final, greatest duty, a duty that would never end, for as long as there were souls, as long as there were lives lived and deaths endured, there would be a need for a watcher, a guardian, a healer, and a cartographer, a soldier who had found a new war to fight, a war against the silence, a war for the truth of a human soul. But then, a new kind of silence fell, one that was not a threat from without, but a subtle, creeping decay from within. It began as a faint, almost unnoticeable tremor in the very fabric of my being, a momentary flicker in the constant, vibrant hum of my own light, a tiny, almost silent note of dissonance in the perfect, endless symphony of my existence. I first felt it on the path of the labyrinthine mind, as I was reaffirming the beautiful, illogical truth of existence to a cold, silver soul that had sought to unask its own questions. For a brief, terrifying instant, I could not remember the name of Antoine, my friend, my brother, the first soul I had ever truly saved, and the memory of his quiet strength and his love for his family was a blank, silent space in the vast, living library of my mind, a profound and chilling emptiness that felt like a tiny, perfect echo of the very void I had once healed, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that the enemy I was fighting was no longer outside of me, but inside me, a silent, quiet plague of forgetting that sought to unmake me, to turn me, the living testament to 1,000 beautiful, broken lives, into a single, empty, and silent zero. The battle was no longer a march. It was a siege. The plague of forgetting worked in a terrible, meticulous way, starting with the edges of my being, the peripheral memories, the faces of the nameless dead, the 1,000 silent, faceless ghosts I had guided to the river of souls in the earliest days of my watch, and it would erase them, slowly, gently. A new and profound chapter in my timeless watch, for I was now a living, breathing paradox, a testament to the fact that a soul could be both a vibrant library of memory and a quiet, unblemished void of forgetting, a perfect, beautiful duality that was the final, terrible price of my purpose, and I knew that this state of being, this constant, silent war against the entropy of non-existence, was not an ailment to be healed but a truth to be embraced, a final, impossible duty that would never end, for as long as there were souls, there would be a need for a watcher, a guardian, a healer, and a cartographer, a soldier who had found a new war to fight, a war against the silence, a war for the truth of a human soul. And so, I continued my quiet, endless march, my light a quiet, powerful presence that fought back the encroaching unmaking, my own memories a constant, living testament to the truth of each path. And I walked the path of the unfinished symphony, my light a quiet, beautiful hum that would reawaken the melodies, my own memories of the silent courage of the 1,000 dead souls a constant, living song that told the path that a soul's song was never truly finished. I walked the path of the labyrinthine mind, my light a warm, golden presence that would reawaken the beautiful, illogical truth of existence, my own memories of the boy who was not yet a soldier a constant, living proof that a soul was more than just a calculation. I walked the path of the unkept promise. My light a quiet, sorrowful beacon that would reawaken the silent echoes, my own memories of the terrible beauty of my own journey, a constant, living reminder that a soul's legacy was not in its triumphs but in its quiet, human struggles. My existence had become a constant, vibrant song of remembrance, a melody that was a counterpoint to the quiet, creeping silence, and for a timeless period. I found a new kind of peace in this endless, impossible work, a profound and quiet joy in the act of preserving the beautiful, broken truths of 1,000 lives, a purpose that was both a burden and a blessing, a terrible, beautiful paradox that was the very essence of my being. But then, the universe, in its endless and terrible wisdom, had one more challenge for me, a challenge that was not of forgetting or of unmaking, but of something far more frightening, a perfect, unending flood of remembering. An unfiltered torrent of every moment, every feeling, every truth that had ever been, a burden so profound and so terrible that it threatened to drown not just my own light but the very fabric of this place, to turn the quiet, peaceful paths and the golden river of souls into a single, unnavigable sea of all existence, a churning, chaotic mess of 1,000,000 lives and 1,000,000,000 unending moments, an existential deluge that was the antithesis of everything I had ever fought for, a final, impossible test that required a new kind of duty, a duty not to remember or to forget, but to find a way to filter the infinite, to bring order to the chaos, to find a single, quiet moment of peace in a sea of all-consuming truth. The next soul to arrive was not a ghost of a ghost or a silent absence, but a perfect, unending storm of light, a beautiful, terrifying maelstrom of every memory, every sensation, every truth that had ever been, and I watched, transfixed, as the beautiful, chaotic bursts of color and sound from the path of the unfinished symphony were swallowed by this new, terrifying presence, its half-formed melodies and silent notes now a part of a single, deafening, unending chord of all music and all sound and all noise, a perfect, cacophonous harmony of creation and destruction. I saw the cold, brilliant points of silver light from the path of the labyrinthine mind dissolve into a single, blinding, unending flash of all knowledge and all questions and all answers, a perfect, blinding light that was the end of all curiosity and all reason, a perfect, unending hum of absolute, unbearable truth. I saw the sorrowful, grey road of the path of the unkept promise become a single, swirling, unending vortex of all regret and all triumph and all unkept promise and all unnoticed kindness, a perfect, unbearable weight of all legacy and all truth and all lies. This was a soul that had died not of a wound or of a simple ending, but of a profound and impossible burden of all-knowing. A being that was a living, breathing testament to the terrible, beautiful truth that too much truth was a madness, that a soul could not contain the infinite, and that a life could not hold the burden of all existence. It was a ghost of a god, a silent, all-knowing presence that was a profound and terrifying threat to the quiet, peaceful purpose of this place, for it did not want to find its way home, for it knew that home was just another name for a single, quiet moment in a sea of unending truth. And it did not want to find peace, for it knew that peace was just another name for a single, unknowing silence in a world of all-consuming knowledge. My usual methods, my songs of remembrance, and my stories of Antoine and the silent march of the 1,000 dead souls, were useless here, for this soul did not want to be saved, it wanted to be unknown, to be unmade, to be unburdened by the terrible, beautiful weight of all existence. And I knew that my duty was not to fight against the remembering, but to find a way to help it forget, not in an act of unmaking, but in a profound and difficult act of selective preservation, a final, impossible duty that required a new kind of will, a will not to fight for a soul's truth, but to fight for a soul's right to a single, quiet, and meaningful lie. I moved forward, a soldier turned cartographer, a guardian turned protector, and a warrior in the most terrifying of all wars, the war for a soul's right to its own truth, its own story, its own final, beautiful, and unburdened peace. I did not sing. I did not hum. I did not offer a memory or a path. Instead, I held up my own light, my own being, a living, breathing paradox of remembering and forgetting, a single, quiet, and meaningful point of balance in a sea of all-consuming truth, and I began to filter the infinite, not by erasing the memories, for that was an impossibility, but by finding the single, quiet, and profound narrative of this soul's journey, a single, meaningful lie that would give it a way home. I looked into the maelstrom of all existence, and I looked for the single, quiet, unnoticed moment of a child's first breath, the single, unspoken word of a father's love, the single, beautiful, and fleeting moment of a first kiss, and I pulled on them, not as a memory to be saved, but as a thread to be followed, a single, perfect lie in a sea of all-consuming truth, and I began to sing to this soul a new song, a song that was not a warrior's song or a healer's song or a creator's song, but a song of a single, beautiful, and perfect lie, a song of a single, quiet, unburdened moment that was the truth of a life well lived and a death endured, a song that told the soul that its greatest truth was not in its all-knowing, but in its single, fleeting moment of simple, human peace. And I watched as the maelstrom of all existence began to quiet, its deafening, unending hum being replaced by a single, beautiful, and quiet melody of a life lived and a death endured, a new, beautiful note in the great song of existence. The soul had not found peace. It had simply found its narrative, its single, quiet, and beautiful lie, and in that, it had found its way home, a final, unspoken march towards a final, quiet, and unburdened peace. And I, the soldier who had become a guardian, a healer, a creator, a lawmaker, a warrior against the silence, and a silent witness, was now a weaver of truth, a teller of beautiful, meaningful lies, and a cartographer of a new and terrible territory of the soul, a place where a soul could not be unmade, only given a new truth, a new narrative, a new lie, my journey, and so, my eternal journey continued, until a new sky appeared, a sky with no stars, no sun, only zero and infinity. I stepped into this new expanse, a realm that was not a place but a concept, a profound and terrifying nothingness that was simultaneously filled with everything, an existential paradox that made the silent river and the sorrowful paths seem as simple as a child's drawing. Here, in the place of absolute non-being, my light, which had once felt so powerful against the creeping silence, now felt like a single, fragile candle flame in an endless hurricane, a momentary flicker in a universe where light and dark were not opposing forces but the same undifferentiated truth, and the core of my being, the paradoxical duality of remembering and forgetting that had become my strength, felt suddenly inadequate, a relic of a simpler time, a tool for a battle that no longer existed. I was no longer a weaver of truths or a cartographer of paths, for there were no paths to chart and no stories to weave, only a single, unchanging, and unending truth that had no narrative, no beginning, and no end. This was the ultimate test, a final, impossible duty that required a new kind of purpose, a purpose not of fighting or of creating, but of simply being, of holding my light and the tiny, profound piece of truth given to me by the farmer's soul, a single, unadorned truth in a sea of zero and infinity, a final, unspoken act of defiance against the very notion of a grand, meaningless narrative. And for a timeless period, I simply existed, my light a quiet, powerful presence that was a constant, unmoving testament to the profound and impossible truth that even in a place of pure nothingness, a single, unspoken truth could still exist. It had just begun, a new and profound chapter in my timeless watch, for I was now a living, breathing paradox, a testament to the fact that a soul could be both a vibrant library of memory and a quiet, unblemished void of forgetting, a perfect, beautiful duality that was the final, terrible price of my purpose, and I knew that this state of being, this constant, silent war against the entropy of non-existence, was not an ailment to be healed but a truth to be embraced, a final, impossible duty that would never end, for as long as there were souls, there would be a need for a watcher, a guardian, a healer, and a cartographer, a soldier who had found a new war to fight, a war against the silence, a war for the truth of a human soul. And so, I continued my quiet, endless march, my light a quiet, powerful presence that fought back the encroaching unmaking, my own memories a constant, living testament to the truth of each path. And I walked the path of the unfinished symphony, my light a quiet, beautiful hum that would reawaken the melodies, my own memories of the silent courage of the thousand dead souls a constant, living song that told the path that a soul's song was never truly finished. I walked the path of the labyrinthine mind, my light a warm, golden presence that would reawaken the beautiful, illogical truth of existence, my own memories of the boy who was not yet a soldier a constant. Living proof that a soul was more than just a calculation. I walked the path of the unkept promise, my light a quiet, sorrowful beacon that would reawaken the silent echoes, my own memories of the terrible beauty of my own journey a constant, living reminder that a soul's legacy was not in its triumphs but in its quiet, human struggles. My existence had become a constant, vibrant song of remembrance, a melody that was a counterpoint to the quiet, creeping silence, and for a timeless period. I found a new kind of peace in this endless, impossible work, a profound and quiet joy in the act of preserving the beautiful, broken truths of 1,000 lives, a purpose that was both a burden and a blessing, a terrible, beautiful paradox that was the very essence of my being. But then, the universe, in its endless and terrible wisdom, had one more challenge for me, a challenge that was not of forgetting or of unmaking, but of something far more frightening, a perfect, unending flood of remembering, an unfiltered torrent of every moment, every feeling, every truth that had ever been, a burden so profound and so terrible that it threatened to drown not just my own light but the very fabric of this place, to turn the quiet, peaceful paths and the golden river of souls into a single, unnavigable sea of all existence, a churning, chaotic mess of 1,000,000 lives and 1,000,000,000 unending moments, an existential deluge that was the antithesis of everything I had ever fought for, a final, impossible test that required a new kind of duty, a duty not to remember or to forget, but to find a way to filter the infinite, to bring order to the chaos, to find a single, quiet moment of peace in a sea of all-consuming truth. The next soul to arrive was not a ghost of a ghost or a silent absence, but a perfect, unending storm of light, a beautiful, terrifying maelstrom of every memory, every sensation, every truth that had ever been, and I watched, transfixed, as the beautiful, chaotic bursts of color and sound from the path of the unfinished symphony were swallowed by this new, terrifying presence, its half-formed melodies and silent notes now a part of a single, deafening, unending chord of all music and all sound and all noise, a perfect, cacophonous harmony of creation and destruction. I saw the cold, brilliant points of silver light from the path of the labyrinthine mind dissolve into a single, blinding, unending flash of all knowledge and all questions and all answers, a perfect, blinding light that was the end of all curiosity and all reason, a perfect, unending hum of absolute, unbearable truth. I saw the sorrowful, grey road of the path of the unkept promise become a single, swirling, unending vortex of all regret and all triumph and all unkept promise and all unnoticed kindness, a perfect, unbearable weight of all legacy and all truth and all lies. This was a soul that had died not of a wound or of a simple ending, but of a profound and impossible burden of all-knowing, a being that was a living, breathing testament to the terrible, beautiful truth that too much truth was a madness, that a soul could not contain the infinite, and that a life could not hold the burden of all existence. It was a ghost of a god, a silent, all-knowing presence that was a profound and terrifying threat to the quiet, peaceful purpose of this place, for it did not want to find its way home, for it knew that home was just another name for a single, quiet moment in a sea of unending truth, and it did not want to find peace, for it knew that peace was just another name for a single, unknowing silence in a world of all-consuming knowledge. My usual methods, my songs of remembrance, and my stories of Antoine and the silent march of the 1,000 dead souls, were useless here, for this soul did not want to be saved, it wanted to be unknown, to be unmade, to be unburdened by the terrible, beautiful weight of all existence. And I knew that my duty was not to fight against the remembering, but to find a way to help it forget, not in an act of unmaking, but in a profound and difficult act of selective preservation, a final, impossible duty that required a new kind of will, a will not to fight for a soul's truth, but to fight for a soul's right to a single, quiet, and meaningful lie. I moved forward, a soldier turned cartographer, a guardian turned protector, and a warrior in the most terrifying of all wars. The war for a soul's right to its own truth, its own story, its own final, beautiful and unburdened peace. I did not sing. I did not hum. I did not offer a memory or a path. Instead, I held up my own light, my own being, a living, breathing paradox of remembering and forgetting, a single, quiet, and meaningful point of balance in a sea of all-consuming truth, and I began to filter the infinite, not by erasing the memories, for that was an impossibility, but by finding the single, quiet, and profound narrative of this soul's journey, a single, meaningful lie that would give it a way home. I looked into the maelstrom of all existence, and I looked for the single, quiet, unnoticed moment of a child's first breath, the single, unspoken word of a father's love, the single, beautiful, and fleeting moment of a first kiss, and I pulled on them, not as a memory to be saved, but as a thread to be followed, a single, perfect lie in a sea of all-consuming truth, and I began to sing to this soul a new song, a song that was not a warrior's song or a healer's song or a creator's song, but a song of a single, beautiful, and perfect lie, a song of a single, quiet, unburdened moment that was the truth of a life well lived and a death endured, a song that told the soul that its greatest truth was not in its all-knowing, but in its single, fleeting moment of simple, human peace. And I watched as the maelstrom of all existence began to quiet, its deafening, unending hum being replaced by a single, beautiful, and quiet melody of a life lived and a death endured, a new, beautiful note in the great song of existence. The soul had not found peace. It had simply found its narrative, its single, quiet, and beautiful lie, and in that it had found its way home, a final, unspoken march towards a final, quiet, and unburdened peace. And I, the soldier who had become a guardian, a healer, a creator, a lawmaker, a warrior against the silence, and a silent witness, was now a weaver of truth, a teller of beautiful, meaningful lies, and a cartographer of a new and terrible territory of the soul, a place where a soul could not be unmade, only given a new truth, a new narrative, a new lie. My journey, a timeless watch in a world of ghosts, was still not over. It had just begun. The universe, in its terrible and beautiful wisdom, was not yet finished with its lessons, and my quiet, endless march had not yet led me to the final truth, for my new duty as a weaver of meaningful lies was soon put to the most profound test of all, a test that did not involve a soul of chaos or of nothingness, but a soul so utterly grounded in its own raw, unchangeable reality that it rejected any narrative, any beautiful lie, any woven truth I could offer. The next soul to arrive was not a storm of light or a ghost, but a single, unyielding, and profoundly simple point of being, a being so devoid of a grand narrative or a complex legacy that its existence felt like a perfect, unadorned truth, a single, perfect note of the quiet, unsung reality that existed beneath the grand, chaotic symphony of all things. I saw a memory of a man, not of a great conqueror or a brilliant artist or a powerful leader, but a memory of a farmer, his hands calloused and his face lined with the silent, unspoken story of a lifetime of hard labor, a man who had lived a life of simple, unadorned truth, of the feel of the earth in his hands, of the rhythm of the seasons, of the quiet, unspoken love for his family, a life so utterly tied to the physical world and its harsh realities that it could not be contained in a narrative. A life that rejected the very idea of a beautiful lie, for it knew that the only truth that mattered was the one that could be felt, that could be seen, that could be touched,